Hello everyone and welcome to part 6 of the BMC 1.8 diesel engine build. Okay, we're going to look at the pistons today. Okay, the method that I'm going to use has been covered on other tutorials. However, I'm just going to go over it again of how I install my pistons. Now, these pistons are original to the engine, I think, the one that we're building at the moment. And they're in generally good condition. Okay, no major scoring etching on any of the surfaces. And no signs of valve strike or any pitting or anything like that on the top face or the combustion sort of chamber, as you want to call it. Now, what I have done is fitted new piston rings. They were supplied by a company called Bradford Grinders, and all I've done is place the piston rings, 3 of them on the BMC 1.8 diesel piston, okay, orientated as per the specs. So we've got the oil scraper or the oil ring at the bottom. Okay, with the spring inside, okay, the spring jointed, and then the actual ring itself orientated 180 degrees away from that joint. Okay, and as we're looking at this being the 12 o'clock position, okay, that's now roughly orientated at around the 7 o'clock position. So the open part of that oil scrape, that oil ring, is now pointing towards the 7 o'clock direction. We then got the upper 2 compression rings then, okay, where your openings are on the side of the pistons. Okay, I've got one sort of as we're working from the bottom upwards, I've got one open area facing at the 10 o'clock position, and then the top ring at the 2 o'clock position. So that's how I've orientated these rings. Now, the considerations when we're looking at the pistons then, okay, we want to firstly check that there's no major scoring anywhere on there, that they're free from carbon, cleaned up as best as possible. Don't use any sort of abrasive because you'll end up causing damage to the piston itself. Now, a piston I've got from another engine then, another BMC 1.8, as you can see from the top, okay, there's been some major valve strikes in the past, some pitting, etching, scoring, although the sides are in good condition. Okay, no signs of fracturing anywhere. Okay, the top has been subject to some arduous life. I won't reuse this, I'll replace these pistons. The other thing we're going to look at then is the con rods. Okay, the con rods are cast as one piece and then cut. So they are exactly specific to that complete con rod assembly. You can't mix and match, even though the numbers might match or anything like that. They're weighted and they're specific to that con rod. So if either side of the con rod's got damaged due to, let's say, a spun bearing or anything like that, okay, ditch the con rod, get a new one. You can use different con rods from a different engine, i.e. another 1.8, but they must be matching parts. Now, one of the other con rods that I've got then, just to show you the spun bearing, okay, when you're inspecting the con rods, as you can see, the bearing spun pretty badly in this one. It sort of welded itself to the con rod and then etched the con rod itself. So that's one for the scrap bin or make a presentation or something, I don't know. So what we're looking at then is once the rings are orientated as per the specs, we're just going to use a simple piston ring compression tool. Okay, it's about £3 item. Okay, with the Allen key recess pointing upwards, and then all we're looking to do is just cover all of the piston rings and then tighten it up to compress the rings. So on the BMC 1.8s then, you have sort of combustion recess on top of the piston, and that should be pointing towards the oil hole on the con rod itself. Okay, if it's orientated in any other direction, it's on wrong. Okay, and the circlips need to be removed, the gudgeon pin taken out, and obviously reorientated. Okay, so we're pretty much set up, ready to go. Okay, we've got the piston ring compression tool, okay, all tightened up. And what I've done just to protect the crankshaft and any other metal parts is just used a bit of 1/4 inch hose and just encased the connecting bolts just so that they don't scratch or etch as we're placing the piston in. What we're also looking at then is to ensure that the crankshaft is at bottom dead center, okay, to give us more room and avoid any sort of conflicts as we're placing it in. And then lightly using a dab of the engine oil that we're going to use in the engine. Okay, we're just going to lightly coat the inside of the cylinder bore, okay, which will aid in getting the piston in itself. Okay, the piston should go in without any really arduous effort. And as we're looking at the front of the engine here with the water pump, okay, this being the right hand side, we need to ensure that the combustion chambers, okay, are orientated facing towards the right hand side of the engine. Okay, and all we do is we gently lower that in place. Before I do that then, just one last double check, okay, number 1 marked on the conrod there, number 1 marked on the top of the piston itself, okay, and then just gently lower it in. Okay, so it sits flush there. What we're then looking for is using either a piece of wood or a rubber-ended mallet, something like that, okay, is we just make sure that it's perfectly orientated, okay, and then we're just gently tapping the piston in place. Okay, and there she goes, sat inside the cylinder bore. Once they're all in and orientated, then what we can do is flip the engine upside down again, okay, which will enable us to place in the conrod bearings or the big end bearings, and obviously the other half of the conrod and the retaining bolts. Okay, some of them can be quite stubborn. Okay, if you get into that position, then it might be worth just reorientating it, taking it out, having a look, and then placing it back in and trying again. Okay, so the block's flipped upside down again. We've removed our makeshift protectors off of the conrod bolts, okay, or retainers. Okay, and what we're looking at now is enough movement to get in there, make sure the inside of the conrod is free from scoring, free from grease and debris. That part needs to remain dry for now. Okay, enough room to get our new bearing shell, or bearing half, inside the conrod with the locking tab in place. Okay, then we can go underneath, push the piston up so that sits flush onto the crankshaft, put the second half of the bearing in, the cap onto the conrod, and then secure it down with its 2 nuts. So for some reason this one took a little bit of persuading to get it lined up, but we've got our 2 retaining nuts on, and I'm just using a spanner now, ring spanner, okay, just for the moment ensure that this is correctly in place. So at the moment I'm just going along with a small bar, okay, and just doing these at the moment just over hand tight. Okay, and I'm going to work my way around respectively 2, 3 and 4, carrying out the same procedure, just a little bit of light lubrication in between, and making sure that there's no debris or ingress on the crankshaft as we're doing that. Also, as I'm going along, okay, I'm just giving the crankshaft a little wiggle backwards and forwards, and just making sure that everything's still free moving as we go along. At any point, if you get any major tension, okay, there could be a problem. Could be one of the piston rings didn't seat correctly or something like that, and you may need to backtrack and find out what the error is. Now, things are going to start tightening up a bit as it's obviously a brand new build, but there shouldn't be any sort of arduous effort required. All I've done is put the 33mm crankshaft pulley bolt back in, and using an extension bar, all I've done is just simply put it so that I can put enough force on it, okay, nothing arduous, look, there it is, just enable me to get the last working pieces in. Okay, ensuring that the camshaft is completely set out of the way to make sure that there's no conflicts. What we're just going to do is give it some rotations just to get the oil working around the new bearings, and just make sure we've still got a nice fluid rotation. Again, shouldn't be anything over arduous. And there we go. Okay folks, so that concludes part 6, quite a short one, but that's just my piston installation. I hope you enjoyed watching, look forward to part 7.